right, we are finally wrapping up our crazy Bible study. So this is finally the last one. We started this back in September, so we were supposed to kind of do this until Thanksgiving, but here we are in February, just now wrapping it up about 3 months later than I had planned. So there was other things that I was hoping to kind of accomplish this year, but you know, COVID has messed it up for everybody, right? There's a lot that we all hope to accomplish this year that didn't happen. So, so for a lot of you that can't think that far back, or maybe you've kind of been hit and miss, let's kind of review some of the crazy Bible studies that we actually had. The first one we did was the first murder in human history. The earth literally opened up and swallowed families of those who led a rebellion against Moses. Does anybody remember what happened to the priests that participated in the rebellion? That was way back in September. Anybody remember that? The earth opened up, the leaders fell in, the earth closed back up. What happened to the priests that were left behind? Fire.
They got,
Emma?
they were like lit on fire.
Right, they were lit on fire because there was fire that literally rained. It literally rained fire. Okay? Not like an acid rain, like fire literally fell from the sky and caught these people on fire. It was crazy. Next, we studied about a talking donkey. Then the sun stood still. We talked about the science behind that. And then a military leader was killed by a woman who waited for him to go to sleep, and she drove a tent stake through his head and pinned him to the ground. That's actually one of my favorite stories. I don't know why, that was one of my favorites. Then, an army of angels that were on fire surrounded Israel's enemies. King Uzziah got leprosy on his face and had to live the rest of his life in quarantine. And I think we talked that week of how fitting that was, how we really understand what quarantine means. So, God uses a beauty pageant to save his people from being destroyed. That kind of sounds like the plot to Miss Congeniality, if you've seen that movie. It's not. It is an actual Bible story, okay? The story of Esther. And then last week, God had Ezekiel lie on his side. Anybody remember how many days he lied on his side? 430 days, right? He had to spend, what, 390 on one side, 40 on the other. So 430 days. Then he had to cook his food in the most disgusting way. We've talked about that. Anybody remember how he had to? Anybody want to talk about that? Poo, right? That's wonderful, right? So
you should have made AJ this.
Right. So they actually sell something called Ezekiel bread. I won't eat it because that makes me think of like poo bread. I'm not eating Ezekiel bread. That's supposed to be like super healthy. I'm out on Ezekiel bread just because of the Bible story of how Ezekiel bread was originally made. I'm out on that. So, but they do sell, if you want to go to the store and get you some Ezekiel bread, they do sell that. I'm sure it's not made the same way, but it is there in the store. So tonight's story is so crazy that I'm going to have to be careful to kind of keep it youth appropriate. Right? So I'm glad that our Bibles, the version that we use is going to use the word that it does. There's other versions that would say it a little more differently than what I'm going to say it this evening. So this translation does help me out a little bit. So turn in your Bibles to the book of Hosea, chapter 1. Hosea, chapter 1. You may have never even heard of Hosea. Right? And as young as you are, I'm going to explain to you why you've probably never heard of Hosea and why the pastor skips over this book. Okay? Casey said it's not in the Bible. You got one of those, huh?
Oh no, it's just in the very tag.
It is. All right. So the book of Hosea. If you find the book of Daniel, it's right past that. So the book is called Hosea. So who do you think the book is about?
Hosea.
Wrong. Who's the book about? Who's the book of Hosea about? God, right? Who's the Bible about? God. I'm just joking with you guys, okay? Yeah, you're right. It is Hosea, right? Okay.
She said Hosea. No, wrong.
Right. just messing with you. I knew that was going to be the answer. So that's you're right. It is. The book is about a prophet named Hosea. So when we begin to read our story, the Bible is going to tell Hosea to marry a woman, the word is going to be promiscuity. It's a very kind, nice word in our translation. But we're just going to understand this word as adultery. Okay, so as we've gone through church life, you all heard the word adultery?
Yes.
It's very simply put, it's when a married husband and wife cheats on their spouse. Very simple, okay? So we're going to just kind of keep it there, okay? The Bible goes into a little bit deeper. We're not going to go as deep as the Bible goes with this particular woman. So we're just going to use promiscuity and adultery. So we're just going to kind of keep it there, okay? So when you hear that word in the Bible, it's about a spouse who's going to cheat on the other spouse, okay? So in the Old Testament, which is where this story occurs, adultery is against God's law, being the 10 Commandments. The 7th commandment says, do not commit adultery. Leviticus chapter 20. The punishment for committing adultery became death. So the reason this punishment is so severe is because of the severe consequences adultery has on so many human relationships, including the marriage, the family, and even the community. So there's not a lot of guys in here, okay? There's 2 young guys and 2 adults, okay? So for the 5 of us that are in here, what we have to understand is when you guys get older and you guys get married, there is collateral damage that goes along with the God-given role of being the man, okay? This is a topic that I'm very passionate about. So when I'm about to go into, I'm including myself in this talk, okay? Girls, the reason we're having this talk is it is important for you to understand the God-given role of the man so that you can better understand what kind of guy it is that God is going to select for you, that you should be looking for. So just because I'm talking to the guys, don't check out. This is very important that you understand this as well, because this is the kind of guy you need to be on the hunt for. Okay? So yes, I said hunt. Hunt these guys out. This kind of guy that God sets out to say, this is what the man looks like, these are the guys you need to specifically hunt out. Okay? So as a man, talking to the fellas, even you young guys, this is for you in the future, okay? As a man, you commit adultery, which means you cheat on your wife in any way, being physically, mentally, emotionally. You do that with what you watch on TV, what you watch on your phone, the movies you watch. Then when you get older, you flirt with a coworker or an outside vendor or a waitress. The way you look at a woman as she walks by, or the things you think about a woman other than your wife. There is collateral damage that goes along with those things. That cheating will negatively affect the relationship with your wife, with your children, and even yourself. You are showing your daughter that this is the kind of man that you need to go after. This is the kind of man you need to marry. So he should treat his wife like this. He should treat his children like this. You are showing your son what kind of man he is to be. This is how you treat your wife. This is how you treat your kids. So when you commit adultery, again, physically, mentally, or emotionally, there's collateral damage. What I mean by that is there's all this other things that go in, not just what affects you. There's all this other thing that's like domino effects that are kind of falling all around you in what you're showing your wife and what you're showing your children. What you're telling your wife is that you are not good enough. You commit these adulterous acts. You're telling your wife, you are not the apple of my eye. You are not the most important thing to me. You are not everything to me. There's other things that interest me above you. You are not good enough. You're telling your daughter, you have to be prettier than your mom, and you got to do better than her. Raise your hand if you're a girl in here and there's somebody that you can think of right now that's better than your mom. Just tell me who that is. Who's better than your mom? So when you tell a daughter that your mom's not pretty enough and your mom's not good enough, what you have just done is put a weight on her that she can't bear. Because if you're telling her that she's not good enough, there's nobody better in the world than her. So what you've just done, you've said that there's probably not a God I'm going to be able to maintain. I'm not going to make him happy. Because if my mom's not good enough, man, I'm sure not going to be. I'm never going to be as good as her, let alone be better than her. So as a man, you know what you've just done? You've just crushed her. You put a weight on her that she can't bear. An expectation that she will never be able to live up to in her own mind. You're telling your son that women are expendable. If you don't like the one you had, just go get another one. You're not the problem, she is. It's what you're telling your family. This is the collateral damage that happens around you. But this is not what God has called us to, as he calls us as men to lead out spiritually our homes. God has placed it on the man. Listen, it's on the man that his wife look like a well-watered vine, that she grow in her gifting. So, women, though, your wife should completely blossom. That her skills and what she's good at should just over-exceed because of the way that you lead her. She should just be wonderful as an overflow of the way that you treat her. It has been placed on the man that his daughter know what a godly man looks like. It has been placed on the man to show his son what it means to love his wife, to love his children, and to lead out spiritually in his home. So when the man commits adultery, physically, emotionally, mentally, whether anyone knows about it or not, there is collateral damage with that. Because even if no one else knows, you know, and you'll hate yourself for the fraud that you are. Collateral damage. So, since our group is primarily girls, especially young girls, let me talk to you guys for a second. I want to say this. Don't marry a boy that refuses to step into what God has called him to. The manhood that God has selected him for. Don't tolerate that, for him to refuse to step into it. Don't allow that. Don't overlook who he really is because of how he looks or how he makes you feel. Don't let a guy smooth talk you, and next thing you know, it's actually not a guy that's not interested in the manhood that God has created for him. If you date a boy who says things about other girls, or looks at other girls, or talks about girls in inappropriate ways with his friends, trust me when I say he'll bring adultery into your marriage. Back when we did our study through the book Song of Songs several years ago, I said this: you have no business dating unless you know what you want and you know what you're willing to wait for. If you're not willing to wait for what it is I want, then you have no business dating. Don't sacrifice, girls, don't sacrifice your imminent worth for a pretty face or for the way that the guy smooth talks you. And if you're there and you think, well, I'm going to fix him, and I know he's this way, but I'm going to change him because he loves me like that, and I love him like that, we're just going to change. Trust me when I say he will not. You cannot change him. Only God can change him. Don't put that weight on yourself. You're not going to do it. God has to change him. And I know there's some of the girls in this room that have felt that, who have been experienced to that. So I know you've seen it. And you don't have to follow that cycle. You know what God says about a man and what he's called to do. Those are the guys you need to go find. Watch out for those red flags that I'm telling you. A grown man, I'm 37 years old, I'm the same person as I was when I was 17. Not much different, okay? So guy, he's going to grow up. No, he's not, okay? We're all just big adult 12-year-olds, okay? I mean, it is what it is, okay? So, if you don't believe us, let's get a football game going out here and it'll get serious real quick like we're a bunch of little kids, okay? So, now that I've kind of beat this dead horse and we kind of understand the seriousness of adultery, it's not just a word the Bible throws around, but it has collateral damage that goes with it. So that we all understand the seriousness of this topic, our story tonight will use the word promiscuity, and that word simply means adultery. Okay? So, now that we understand it, let's read Hosea chapter 1, starting in verse 2. We'll read down to verse 9. When the Lord first spoke to Hosea, he said this to him: Go and marry a woman of promiscuity, and have children of promiscuity. For the land is committing blatant acts of promiscuity by abandoning the Lord. So he went and married Gomer. Sounds pretty, don't you? Gomer. Right? So he went and married Gomer, daughter of Diblaim, and she conceived and bore him a son. Then the Lord said to him, Name him Jezreel, which means God sows. For in a little while I will bring the bloodshed of Jezreel on the house of Jehu, and put an end to the kingdom of the house of Israel. On that day I will break the bow of Israel in the valley of Jezreel. She conceived again and gave birth to a daughter. And the Lord said to him, Name her Lo-Ruhamah, which means no compassion. For I will no longer have compassion on the house of Israel. I will certainly take them away. But I will have compassion on the house of Judah. and I will deliver them by the Lord their God. I will not deliver them by bow, sword, or war, or by horses and cavalry. After Gomer had weaned Lo-Ruhamah, she conceived and gave birth to a son. Then the Lord said, name him Lo-Ammi, which means not my people. For you are not my people, and I will not be your God. So Hosea is commanded by God to marry a woman that is going to cheat on him. And the Lord even says that. Go marry a woman, go marry an adulterous woman. Flat out, word for word, what God says. Go marry a woman that is going to cheat on you. And then Hosea is commanded by God to have children with a woman that is going to cheat on him. And Hosea being a prophet, God uses Hosea's children to reveal a prophecy on Israel and Judah. And we see a progression with every child that's born. First, God is going to sow the destruction of Israel. This just simply means he's already planning it. It will one day grow and it's going to become a reality. So there's going to be destruction of Israel. Has anyone tried to plant something using a seed? Like not just a plant, but like you actually bought seed and tried to... Madison, what did you try to grow? Watermelon just from seed. Anybody try to grow grass? Right? It's not as easy as it sounds, right? So Lori and I, we tried to grow lilies in a flower bed once. And they came up like the year we planted them. But then like the next year, like some of them, a few of them popped up, like one or two. After that, they were done. We never saw them again. So what God is saying here is that he's planted the seed. He's already made the decision. And the kingdom of Israel is going to come to an end. Then, with the birth of their daughter, God progresses his plan by saying he will not have compassion on Israel, but he will have compassion on Judah. And this is actually showing God's kindness, God's loving kindness. Israel was split into two kingdoms. We talked about that last week when Ezekiel laid on one side and on the other. One was to represent Israel, the other one was to show Judah. So Israel is the northern kingdom, Judah is the southern kingdom. So they're all, it's all God's chosen people, but they split up into two different kingdoms, but it's all God's chosen people. So even though both kingdoms are full of God's chosen people, he did not punish Judah for Israel's sins. But then we get to the difficult verse of our passage. With the birth of their third child, we hear God say, you are not my people, and I will not be your God. Doesn't that sound opposite of God's loving character? The fact that he's loving and he's kind and he's merciful and he's patient with us. I mean, doesn't that kind of sound complete opposite of what we've seen God's character all throughout Scripture? But we have to understand this is a temporary punishment. This is not God saying, I'm turning my back on you forever. So this would be a very difficult passage for us to break down if it actually stopped there. But God makes this very clear to us in the next two verses, and then even into chapter 2. So let's begin reading verse 10. So he just said, you are not my people, I will not be your God. Verse 10, yet the number of the Israelites will be like the sand of the sea, which cannot be measured or counted. And in the place where they were told, you are not my people, they will be called sons of the living God. And the Judeans and the Israelites will be gathered together. They will appoint for themselves a single ruler and go up from the land. For the day of Jezreel will be great. Call your brothers my people and your sisters compassion. So the two things he just said, that he's not going to have compassion on them, he's not going to be their people. He just said, call your brothers my people, call your sisters compassion. So here we go. So here we see that the punishment that the Lord declares for them will be temporary and they will be restored. So we see them being restored. Call your brothers this, call your sisters that. And it's redeeming what the judgment that he had talked about previously. So getting back to Hosea, the Lord commands his prophet to marry an adulterous woman and to have children with her. So if she is an adulterous woman, when they get married, what do you think happens when they get married and have kids? You think she just cleans her act up? No, she's going to remain an adulterous woman. Okay, so she does not become faithful according to the law of Moses. Because she was unfaithful, the law of Moses actually says that he's allowed to divorce her. But God has other plans. God doesn't say divorce her. He says hang in there, because Hosea goes to God. Look, she's still cheating. She's still doing this. And I'm going to divorce her. And God says, hang on. Flip over to chapter 3. Chapter 3, we're going to read the first 3 verses. And I promise we're going to go somewhere with this. The first 3 verses of chapter 3. He wants to divorce her, but this is God's answer. Then the Lord said to me, go again, show love to a woman who is loved by another man and is an adulteress. Just as the Lord loved the Israelites, though they turned to other gods and loved raisin cakes. So I bought her for 15 shekels of silver and 5 bushels of barley. I said to her, you are to live with me many days. You must not be promiscuous or belong to any man, and I will act the same way toward you. This is a beautiful picture in Scripture. Hosea knows his wife is cheating on him, but God tells him, don't divorce her, but rather go again and show her love, even though she is loved by other men. But look at why. He says, because this is how the Lord loves the Israelites who are cheating on him by loving other gods. Guys, this is a beautiful picture of God and us. Imagine how dirty this had to be for Hosea. Because she's cheating on him, and God says, go find her. Not she was cheating, go talk to her. She is cheating, go find her, go get her. Where do you think his wife was? Probably the neighborhood that a prophet shouldn't be in. What do you think his wife was doing? Probably things that a prophet shouldn't tolerate. But what is God's command? He says, go again and show love to her, just like I have done over and over and over and over again to my chosen people. Here's the crazy part of our story. Once Hosea finds Gomer, he has to buy her. He has to buy her. But they're already married. That means that she's already his. He has to buy what already belongs to him. He finds her cheating on him with another man, and the other man won't let her go unless he buys her from him. That's my wife, okay? Well, if you want her back, you're going to have to pay me 15 shekels of silver, and I'm going to need some barley as well. There's a cost of buying what already belongs to him. But once Hosea buys her back, we don't even see him arguing about this. It just says, I bought her. But once again, Hosea, he buys back what's already his. He tells her, you are to be faithful to me because I am faithful to you. And here's the craziest part of our story, but this hasn't got outrageous yet. You play the part of Gomer. That's you. Each one of us is guilty of loving something other than God. Each one of us is guilty of loving something more than God. But God left heaven. He came to this earth in the form of man named Jesus to have a relationship with you. He came to earth knowing you are spiritually promiscuous, and yet he still chose you. He chose to go again and show love to you even though you are loved by another. But also knew he would have to pay for you. And he did that on the cross. When Hosea paid for Gomer, he didn't have to pay. He didn't have to pay that price. He chose to. He wasn't robbed. Money wasn't taken from him. He willingly gave his money. When Jesus died on the cross, his life wasn't taken. He willingly gave his life for you. God created you, but he still had to buy what was already his through the life, death, and resurrection of Jesus Christ. And when you place your faith in Jesus Christ for salvation, he says you must not be promiscuous or belong to anything else. He calls you to faithfulness. Why? Because he promises he will be faithful to you. God knew what he was buying on the cross. He knew you would be spiritually unfaithful to him. He knew you would turn to other things other than him. He knew you would screw this up. But what does he do about it? He bought you back from your sin and gave you the promise of eternal life. Not because of your faithfulness, but because of his. See, this isn't about Gomer. It's about Hosea. in his endless pursuit of his bride. Guys, this life, it's not about you. It's about God's pursuit of his bride. The book of Revelation says is the bride of Christ, which is the Christians. So Hosea is Jesus, and you are Gomer in this story. We never get to play the hero. God is Hosea, and we play the role of Gomer. Because regardless of how promiscuous we are, he will once again show you love. Because he has a passionate pursuit of you regardless. And what he's calling you to is faithfulness. I've paid the price of my body on the cross. Be faithful to me. I am faithful to you. Be obedient. He's calling us to himself. We talked about it last week, what sanctification is. That's what this is. He's calling us to be more faithful. He's calling us to just learn how to grow in our walk with him. Because he has a passionate pursuit for you. Let's pray.